Welcome to the Limitless Influence podcast. I'm Duke DeLate, dating coach for 15 years, and I'm here with David Sekira, international business coach. What else are you? Communication coach, right? That's the new thing. Yeah.
Correct.
Anyway, basically, this podcast is two veteran coaches getting together and nerding out about concepts that concern communication, connection, and relationships. And if you've listened to the last few, we got kind of deep into some glossary topical stuff. And today we're tackling self-esteem. And David and I did a pre-thing on the podcast, and we had 5 million ideas flying from every which direction, from all the things that we've learned in hypnosis and NLP and in self-development. Like self-esteem is one of those fuzzy concepts that everybody thinks they know what it means, but it's not all that clear. And with that, take it away, David.
Yeah, our conclusion from the pre-talk was that we're actually not self-esteem coaches, and I'm glad that we found that. It's kind of hard to really actually. I think anyone who would pretend to be a self-esteem coach actually doesn't really understand self-esteem, because we found that it's really complicated. So what we're going to talk about here today is going to be definitely something that is colored from our own perceptions. And it's probably going to apply best to the goals that we have helped clients with and that we have helped ourselves with, which is the ability to be more effective in influencing in different situations and environments, whether it's in your intimate relationships, in your professional career relationships, or just your ability to influence yourself. It's not necessarily like we don't necessarily talk about self-esteem here as an end all be all. It's probably just a tool for us. Meaning, if self-esteem is a limiting factor in something that you want to do, this podcast will probably help you to get some clarity on where the limitations might come from. If your entire goal is to increase self-esteem, we probably don't have answers for that, because we don't necessarily know exactly how to measure it even. So, yeah, that was our conclusion from the pre-talk, if you agree. So,
All right. So you were talking a little bit about what self-esteem is earlier, and we came up with a bunch of different angles. I think I'll kind of start with how I functionally define it when I'm talking to clients. I say that self-esteem is basically just how you judge yourself, and you can judge yourself good or bad. But normally, when we're talking about low self-esteem versus high self-esteem, it's really about can am I in the mood to behave in the way I know I want to behave? Right. So if I feel like I have a low self-esteem and then I just can't bring myself to behave in the direction I want to go, then there's a weakness between my own value system and what I'm willing to do to bring that value system about in the world. And so when it comes to self-esteem, self-worth, it's always fluctuating. But we were talking today about the idea that if you can get an internal locus, whereas you judge yourself based on your own value systems, you're going to be a much more effective leader and communicator than if you judge yourself based on the systems of the environment around you or the people around you. And so many people offload their final say of how they look at themselves to other people in their lives, to their partner, or to their friend group, to their corporation or their boss or whatever. And as long as you're outsourcing that to an external source, you're going to get a lot more chaos when it comes to decision making, and you're going to second guess yourself a lot more because you're going to have to check in with the entire external environment. If you can judge yourself based on your own internal value system, then you have much more control and be much more solidarity against the chaos of the world. And that's kind of my working definition. And the way you do that in my mind, and that's what I tell all my clients, is make promises to yourself and then keep them.
keep them.
And for a functional way of building self-esteem or making your behavior more likely to move in the direction you want it to go, and you trust yourselves to make decisions, that's kind of where I fall.
Yeah, I mean, 100% agreed with that. If it's likely that this is not the entire blueprint to build self-esteem. This is for sure like a very big chunk. And if you just follow that advice, which is make promises to yourself that are something you would like to have happen and not something that others would like to have happen for you, and you just apply that, it'll be great. I'll probably start with like a personal story. Until my early 20s, I was living a life that looked really perfect on paper. I had really four pillars in my life: my family, which was really where I belonged. I had my sport, which was my source of personal growth. That was the thing that made me, push myself beyond my limits. I had my studies, which was like leading to a very promising career as a theoretical physicist. And I had my girlfriend of that time, which was already a 5-year, 6-year long relationship. So it was kind of stable, and it was supposed to be, let's say, the future family or relationship. So on paper, I had the perfect safe life that I was supposed to have, and that I think most people would have liked for me, including my parents, even if they never told me that. And so I had all these external things to point to think to myself that I'm great, but deep down, I had this feeling of like, this is not enough for me. And as a result, I really felt pretty bad about myself, and I had a really bad self-talk, as you were saying. And the reason is because I was constantly trying to achieve things that were actually not the things I wanted, that were really aligned with my values, my idea of my ideal life. And I think that's something that most successful men have, is that they are accomplishing things that look cool or look great, but they don't necessarily have the awareness of what actually matters to them. It's something that has to be found. And as a result, the self-esteem is low. When I say self-esteem here, I really talk about two things. I talk about your perception of your core value. Many people will say, oh, I have so much to give. If only I had the chance to, or if I didn't self-sabotage myself. I know deep down I have so many capabilities. That's like your perception of intrinsic value. But the people that say that, their self-esteem still sucks because the way what you said, how they talk to themselves, how they see themselves, how they judge themselves. That's the second part. It's a self-image. So from my definition or my own experience of the world, self-esteem is based on two things: the value you build of yourself, and that is definitely something you can back up by looking back and being like, okay, look, I'm someone that has elements of courage because, I don't know, I jumped off the plane, or I overcome this fear, or I managed to public speak in this situation. I have things to point out that are facts that I can base my value on, or certain level of skills, capabilities, personality traits, big things that drive me. I'm also able to say, for example, that I'm someone that is that can be purposeful, even if it's, I'm not defining myself as someone on purpose, but I can be purposeful because I know in the past I have sometimes put myself on the sides for higher concepts, whether it's for other people or for ideas that I believed in. And I decided that, let's say, my emotions, my thoughts of the moment will matter less than what I'm trying to accomplish. So I have things to point back to build my value. And the second thing is communication, how you communicate with yourself. How you see yourself, how you talk to yourself, how you judge yourself. The best way to think about that is think of a person that you highly esteem without knowing necessarily what it means. Just think about the first person that you would say, I really esteem that person. There's two things that will be there. One, you will believe that for you in your life, this person has a lot of value, for sure. Even if it's just because you love them for some reason, right? Self-love, self-esteem, it's very similar. The self-worth concept, love. It's just that this person has a lot of value for you. But two, no one is perfect, right? So this person most likely sometimes make mistakes and doesn't say things the way you would like to hear them. In these moments, when things are not perfect, according to your image, how do you see them? What would you tell them? And how do you judge them? Most likely, if it's a person that you really esteem, your first response will be, hey, it's okay. Next time it will be better. You just didn't do this well. That's fine. This is not who you are. This is just a mistake. If we translate these concepts of what we do with other people that we esteem to ourselves, I think we get to a closer definition of what is practically doable. Is look at how you interact with yourself when you are not exactly perfect. So Duke was saying, make promises to yourself and then keep them. What happens when you don't keep these promises? What's your internal dialogue going on? how do you see yourself in the, do you immediately see yourself as ugly and a failure and not enough? Or do you tell yourself, okay, this was probably not effective. How can I do it better? Like, do you have like an internal coach that is talking to you, or do you have just an inner bitch that is constantly putting you down? That's that entire speech that I just gave. That's how I see self-esteem. And so for me, the two things to really work on is one, your ability to define what is important in you. And the second is how you communicate with yourself, which really falls, like, I think it aligns very well with what you're saying, because the more you define things that matter to you, and the more you take steps to accomplish them, and you actually follow promises you make to yourself, the more you will start to believe that you're someone that is worth something. One of the things that improved my self-esteem the most is actually the first time I invested in coaching. I was a student. I didn't have money. It was with you, a 7-day workshop. It was, I don't remember how much, $3,000 or whatever. I did not have that money. Yeah. No, man. Back then it was cheaper. No, I think I don't remember, but it was definitely a couple grand. Yeah, probably. But that's those are the, so it was a couple grants, and for me, it was like really outside of my reach. And there was really a question in me is like, am I worth that investment? So essentially, anyone that makes an investment in themselves at some point is going to doubt it, because it's a lot of money, and is it worth it? And the question is really not, is it worth it? Is the change or the transformation that I'm trying to make, am I worth that? And do I believe that I can actually accomplish it by following the system? And when I had to assess that, the couple grands or whatever that I had to pay, I was like, I truly believe that I can make these changes, and I believe that I'm worth this investment. I'm worth this experience. I'm worth this adventure. Whatever it takes, I'm going to make it happen. And that was kind of a choice that I made, but it took like a really internal conversation that lasted probably several days, of me first being like, oh, but even if you do this, it just works for others. Or like, there was this little talk going on inside me. And at some point I decided, okay, I'm worth it, and I'm going to build this constructively and make the moves. And as a result, my behaviors were, part of that money, I got it because I worked my ass off and I found many gigs that I could make money on. Two, I had the courage to talk to people in my life, friends and parents, that could like lend me some of this money so that I can improve, which forced me to like be open and vulnerable. So basically, I decided I'm worth this shit, and I'm going to do everything it takes to get it. And making that investment and the steps that it took to become the person that is worth investing in oneself, not because I have like loads of money, but because the changes that I want to make, I'm worth receiving that. That was something that increased my self-esteem a lot. So here's kind of my personal view on that, based on a few stories and a little bit of that. So take that and maybe make a reaction how self-esteem works for you, and let's say how does it how can it affect you? How can it affect your power on a daily basis?
Yeah, and I think that's really the crux of the issue. It's there's a lot of things that we do as far as nomenclature and defining things, and in the psych world as well as the self-help world, we have to have clear definitions for things and all that. But I think self-esteem is one of those fuzzy things that when you think it's low, you're really describing the fact that you don't trust yourself to make the decisions that you want to make. It's either because, like you said, you don't know what those decisions are going to be, or you don't feel like you're the authority or you're worth it. So I think everybody kind of knows what it feels like to have low self-esteem and high self-esteem, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to power and leadership, however, your ability to trust yourself to make good decisions and behave well is, without deferring it to other people's judgment, that is the crux of what makes a good leader versus a guy who's just playing leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I'll ask you, when you decided that you wanted to start a company, a coaching company, and coming up through the ranks, we used to work for this company called TAM, and David was the fastest coach ever from student to having full blown group coaching gigs, and I trained probably as a trainer. I trained probably close to 20 guys to take that role, and David was the only
Really?
one that stayed, and he's also the fastest to move from student to trainer. And so when you decided you want to start a company, you had a lot of reference experiences from being immersed in it for a long, long time. And people telling you you're a good coach and you've developed programs and all this other stuff. You had the requisite tools. But what made you think that you were A, going to be good at it, and B, going to be successful at it? And did that play any part in your willingness to behave in the direction you wanted to go?
Um, Interesting. It absolutely did not play a role. I did not. I didn't ask myself ever if I would be good at that. I just knew that it was something that I owed to myself to try and to go in that direction. And I gave myself a time frame to which this would be successful at a certain point, at a certain level. And luckily, the results that came quickly through starting that were promising and made me feel good about that. But it was never really like that was never something that I considered in my decision making. Is, am I good enough for that? Essentially, I decided I'm already good enough right now. How can I be even better? And I think that's also another paradigm that is pretty good. It's very easy to just constantly up the bar and be like, okay, I need to go higher and higher because I'm not good enough. But I just decided I want to be more than enough at that point. I'm not saying that I think like that every day, but at that point, I decided, okay, I'm really good enough right now. And I know that if I stay here, I'm going to get bored. I'm going to feel like I'm regressing. And essentially, I'm wasting potential that I have here. Obviously, I started my own company when I was 22, 20, 23, something like that. That's still fairly young. And the idea was, I know I can grow a lot more if I fail and I completely fuck up in the next 5 years. If I try this journey on my own, I got enough reassurance that you said from the first environment that I've been in and building some connections and some, relationships and having people, also asking me for my own opinions instead of following like frameworks that were given. So I had this first reassurance. I think everyone needs to use some form of external feedback to build this first vision of self, because that's normal. But the meaning I associated to that, I think that's what made the difference. When I got really good positive feedback from my clients or my business partners or whatever in the first company that I worked for, The Attractive Man, I didn't tell to myself, oh, all that is because of this company, or it's because of I didn't put the external reasons of why it worked into something that is not in my control. I decided, okay, there must be something untapped in me, and that's why this is the feedback that I'm getting. I want to explore what it is. So I have a client that like 2 days ago, we had a conversation and he told me that repeatedly he does one like inner work process that works really well for him every time. It takes about an hour, so it's kind of intense. And I didn't do that. And so I didn't know exactly what it was. But when he was describing that to me, he was telling me, okay, every time I listen to this thing changes my state, it changes my emotions. And after that, I make completely different decisions. And that was like a wake up call for me. I was like, oh, okay, you think that this thing actually changes you. You don't realize that this thing helps you to tap into one of your own resource that you're using to make these new decisions to feel better about yourself. You are doing something, you're just prompted or triggered by that resource. Okay. And we had like a 35-minute conversation until he had this really awakening moment. Like he realized, oh, it's not this thing that controls me and that does that to me. I don't need to listen to this 1 hour thing. I just need to understand what words or what fucking frequencies or sound or whatever is done or said, or it's just the fact that it's for 1 hour and I'm sitting with some problem that it does that. What is this helping me find in my toolbox that I constantly forget about or that I don't see that makes me actually great? And when he realized that this was the goal of finding that, it entirely shifted. Because before he was focused on, okay, how can I integrate this 1 hour thing into my daily routine? Fuck, I need to do that every day. That sucks. And I don't like myself because now I feel like I'm dependent on this thing. And And that's when he had like, even if it worked, he had a really bad image of himself because he was like, I need this fucking 1 hour entire prompt meditation to feel good about myself. What kind of person am I? So self-esteem is not just about the results that it brings you, because if it's external, never give you that sense. So now the focus shifted on, okay, let's find what this thing actually triggers in me that I'm using, that I'm so effective, and then I can use that thing on demand as much as I want. So that was the main difference for me, is that took these things and decided to, with ups and downs, and nothing is perfect, but to take ownership of these things and stop to think, okay, what if I could have stayed in the company and make good money, okay, but maybe I would have arrived to my 30s and be like, okay, looking back, I kind of wasted my time here, or I knew I had to make this move and I didn't, right? So when you were saying make decisions and stick to them, I also think that there's a part that is kind of like, just follow your gut instinct and don't be afraid to put yourself in uncomfortable situations. And that's where self-esteem will be built. Because if you're able to get yourself out of hard situations, hard stuff, well, you'll feel better about yourself and about your entire being. It will increase this, as I said, your sense of intrinsic value, and it will probably help you to communicate better with yourself. It's kind of like in a relationship. You don't build a healthy couple dynamic or healthy communication when things go well. Like, everybody is able to do that. You do that when things really don't go well, everything is, you get bored, there is no polarity, something is going off, and you're able to go over that problem, right? You face a challenge and you overcome it, then you feel much better about the relationship, and you know that you can trust that person and you can trust yourself and you know how to communicate. If things always went well, that would never happen.
Yeah. I agree with all that stuff, but I had this question in my mind because, like, what if you attack the hard shit and it beats you? How many times does it have to beat you before your self-esteem is destroyed? Right? Like, if I don't know, like, for instance, I'm on my 13th business and I've broken even on 3 of them and failed all of the rest of them. Lost a bunch of money on all of them. The reality of the situation is I'm not terribly good at business, at running a company, right? Um,
Mhm.
but I don't have a self-worth problem about it. I don't have a self-esteem problem about it. Like, it's just data. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to try this thing and I'm going to patch up the things. I'm going to lean into my strength and delegate the weaknesses, right? Because my mission is stronger than my fear of failing a business, right? Like, I would rather reach more and influence more people and coach more people and change more lives than avoid the pain of failing a business, right? So, like I don't have a negative self-talk and beat myself up about business. There's a reality to it that's like, I have not been stellar at marketing, and there are things I need to learn here and there are things I need to learn there. But that focus is very, my behavior is still, we're driving forward on this shit, right? And that's driven by my internal value system. So, like, there are people in the dating world who hire us or hire me specifically, and I can think of much specific examples. They'll come in and be like, I've talked to hundreds of girls, I've done all my approaches, I've done all this stuff, and I've tried the letting go, and I've tried the I got hypnotized or whatever, and I just I'm just bad with chicks, man, and it just doesn't even make any sense. I should probably just give up, but I like the way you talk, so let's see what you got for me, man. Like, and like, they're not setting themselves up for success behaviorally because they've been beaten down so many times, or they've gotten into relationships they thought were going to be a certain way and they got beaten down. So my question is, like, what it sounds like is you're saying that the more acts of courage you do, the better your self-esteem becomes. But what if you take valiant acts of courage on and you suck and you just get beat down every time? Like, when does that stop?
Oh, that's a great question. I think that's independent of self-esteem. Self-esteem will be reflected in your response to that. So someone that, attempts something for the first time and fails and already thinks that he's the worst in the world naturally has a low self-esteem. That's how he responds to that. So we're talking about the perception of one's value and one's self-communication. So self-esteem is just like an indicator of, let's say it's something that you will see, is not something that will change much in the actions. I think someone can absolutely fail 100 times at something, fail every time, feel horrible about it, and still succeed at the end if he just sticks to it. And the reasons why he stick to that might be different than just a high self-esteem. It can just be that there is no other choice. It can be that he has, I have what, how do you call that? I'm walking away from the wall, like burn the boats. Like if you just burn the boats and you have no other options, you will just continue to do that even if your self-esteem sucks, right? Like it's kind of independent of the actions that you take. Uh, it can be, well, that would fall kind of into self-esteem. It could be for like a higher purpose. So now I'm kind of contradicting myself, but let's say the life of someone depends on you continuing to do these things. You will keep failing. The difference is, I think the person with higher self-esteem, first of all, is going to spend a lot less time beating themselves up after the failure, and will go back into like kind of a positive view on that, or let's say at least a constructive response. They will take much faster. They will accept what happened. They will take responsibility over what happened. They will not try to like feel like a victim or whatever. They will very quickly find reasons why it didn't work and what they need to work on. And they will start to make small commitments to get better at that. And they will probably do it in a more conscious way. They will, kind of see a better, like a fuller picture. When you have a low self-esteem, your mind will immediately focus on the negative things. For example, I remember this one interaction that I had. So when lording, dating, after I became a coach, I had like, for a moment, I placed crazy responsibilities on myself, or like expected a lot from myself. I remember this one interaction that went really well. I approached a girl, I don't know where, in a mall. We went on a date. Everything was good and smooth. But I remember that at the beginning, I had like a weird, I didn't feel super confident after like 1 minute of talking to her. Now I don't remember what it is, just remember the interaction. It was either like an eye contact that I struggled to hold, which was not usual for me. And she was really pretty. So I don't know why I really struggled to hold the eye contact. And all the entire time I was thinking that at that moment I didn't hold the eye contact, she must think that I'm, weak and everything. Despite the fact that she was compliant and like, we followed everything and everything happened pretty smoothly. And immediately after that interaction that ended really positively, according to most standards, with intimacy and everything, the only thing that I kept telling myself is, man, you suck. You can't be a coach at this. And this was not enough. Like, this was not exceptional. And at that moment, that was a clear, like, display of low self-esteem, because I created these crazy expectations on myself that were not even aligned with how I wanted things to be. Because the reason was I approached a girl not because, like, that was important to me in that moment, but because that was a way for me to try to validate my own position. And show others how it was, and there were, clients watching me, and it was to impress them. It was not really for my own reasons. It was not important for me. It was to display something to others. So I kind of lost myself in this story. But eventually, the point is, the way I reacted was I completely overrided or stopped to see all the things that were great and positive and that went well. And I just kept seeing this one thing that was bad. And it's not that I decided, okay, I just didn't hold eye contact. Next time maybe I need to, I don't know, take a deeper breath and just imagine that, I don't know what, to make it easier for me to hold the eye contact. I just made it that I'm a piece of shit. Like, that was the conclusion. There was like really no logical, there was no logic in that. It was just, you fucked up at this, therefore you suck. And you're a piece of shit and you're not worthy. That's low self-esteem. So I think someone can still perform well over time. It will just get really hard and it will be really complicated. So self-esteem is kind of like one of these things that, I don't know, it's like an AC when it's warm. Like, you can still do shit when it's hot, but if you have an AC and it's cooler, then it might be easier. It doesn't really change much about that. So yeah, someone that will have a higher self-esteem will display different reactions.
Going back to like my original kind of definition is like your ability to trust yourself to behave in the way you want to. Doesn't mean the results need to come out, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
But one thing you brought up in here was the idea of consciousness, and
Hmm.
what I'm seeing from your story is that when you're operating from, say, shame or fear, you're going to interpret everything through that lens and be a lot less effective when unless you're operating from, like, love or acceptance, right? So
100%. Yes.
so I feel like you're saying a high self-esteem person is going to have a lot more acceptance, and then their behaviors are going to reflect that. And a low self-esteem person is going to get mired down in shame or apathy or whatever, and then their behaviors are not going to be as generative or outpouring, right, above the
Yes.
700
Yes.
level of Hawkins vibration, right?
Yeah, so here we have like a causality problem. Is it that the person was more conscious and therefore they were able to have a higher self-esteem because they were more conscious? Or is it that the person with higher self-esteem has a higher consciousness of the situations? And I think it's the consciousness because I don't think you can really like self-esteem is just a measure. It's something, it's kind of a it's the result of a whole bunch of different things, and it's a feeling that we human use to measure something. It's an indicator of something. It's not something that like you cannot say, okay, Duke, have a better self-esteem now. You can't do that. You will immediately go into, okay, like what can I do to have a higher self-esteem now? Like what can I focus on? What do you want me to experience? So it's really about understanding what you have control over and what you don't, accepting the things you don't have control over, of course, and then focusing on the things you have control over. And setting actions that are, important to you, that's something you have control over. Acting in integrity with that, that's something you have control over. Like if you do, snooze every morning and every morning you tell yourself, I shouldn't do that, and you keep doing it, that's absolutely something you have control over. You just don't have the right strategy for that, but it's something that is really in your control. Consciousness is in our control. So I think that's the most important thing. I really don't see someone have a negative self-talk or I don't know, behaving poorly or something if they decide to have a certain frequency in their consciousness. And that's something we choose, and there are strategies to get ourselves there. So this entire conversation is great because I think people really see self-esteem as an indicator because that's how things make our it's how we feel about the way we are. It's like the knowledge of being. So if I don't know how to be well, I will not feel very well. So that's what I see, right? He said it's knowledge. So knowledge, trust, they will go in the same thing. It's a measure of uh, in NLP. I learned that confidence is the knowledge of doing, and self-esteem is the knowledge of being. Know how to be. Obviously, be something according to something. So it's not. You can be. It can have different flavors, but it's the knowledge of being, or in other words, as you said, the ability to trust. How did you say that? That was very well said. Trust that you. Yeah, I think it even more broadly, trust that you can be the person you say you are. Like just that congruence is probably good enough as a definition of self-esteem. So if I feel low self-esteem, it means that I don't think I was the person I think I am. And that obviously creates like internal negative pressure and everything because I have a clear proof that I'm not the person I think I am. So obviously, who am I now? Like it's normal that people feel bad. It's normal that people having low self-esteem feel bad about themselves because that's the entire point. It's just another indicator, just like other emotions or like other states. It's just a feedback that says, okay, right now you're not really like we. We, the universe, we cannot decide who you are based on the situation, this behavior, and the way you talk to yourself right now. Like there is something incongruent. We need to move forward and improve something. And so self-esteem is just an indicator that tells you how you improve in that. And I think the first thing that you can improve is your consciousness, where you're coming from. The ways to improve your consciousness, like that, there's many ways to do that. The most practical in the moment is the triad from Tony Robbins: change your state, change your focus, change your emotion, change your focus, change your language. That's the first thing. Letting go is another very powerful way to do that. Just reframing things and using all the tools is a powerful way to do that. But essentially, coming from a higher consciousness will immediately improve your level of self-esteem because you just see things more clearly. Therefore, you can probably find who you are in that situation much more with.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. There's a lot of data in that stream. But I agree with all that. What really kind of pricked me is the idea that, let's say, like, you operate from shame, or you operate from guilt, or you operate from desire, or you're unable to move up above that, right? Um,
Yes.
you're not going to trust yourself to get past that level. But when you move into acceptance or neutrality, that self trust is integrated, right? Like,
Hmm.
you're not second guessing yourself, because you're not banging it up against, like, when you're feeling shame, you're not banging it against some other judgment that's like, yeah, that's interesting. We should definitely destroy multiple podcasts with those types of concepts. But we're at 40 something minutes now. So,
Really?
what
I
are
thought all
some,
this time.
practical methods from your mind? I've already kind of told my story about that, to, for that a listener could take away from this thing, that could immediately move them in the direction of self-knowledge or consciousness.
Yeah, the hardest one, but probably the fastest one is when you think no, say no. Like when you're asked to do something that you don't want to do, when you are behaving in a way that you believe you shouldn't behave, have the courage to say no, and loudly. Now, be careful with what I'm saying. It doesn't mean that if your girlfriend says, "Hey, can you please, I don't know, repair the sink," and you feel, "No, I don't want to do that," uh, that you say no. It's just that you own that, "No, I absolutely don't want to do that now." But how can we make it a yes? That would be a better, a better way to do that, right? For example, if if it's important to you, I'll do it. So I have this client who had this argument with his girlfriend uh, a week ago, and he fixed it immediately after one session. But essentially, his girlfriend got used to like play the nice girl in order to get things from men. So one thing that she would ask him to do is like, for example, drive her back home for 2 hours, and it's 2 hours there, 2 hours back. It's crazy. It's super long. Okay, and she would be like, "Oh, but please," and like it would really make me happy, and like she would use these like feminine tactics to make a man kind of melt and want him serve and be good. But every time he would do that, he would feel like he wasted time, and he ended up resenting her for that. And I told him that's not her fault. Like she just applies a strategy that worked for her in the past enough to believe that that's a good strategy. And you are the one that doesn't say no. And so the way to do that is not that he was an asshole and he just said next time, "No, I'm not doing it. Fucking, take the train," because they live far apart. He like based on the conversation we had, he applied the strategy and just explained her, "Hey, every time you have something super important for you, I will prioritize you, you know, all the time. But if right now you're just kind of lazy and you just do that because you want to get a favor from me and it makes you feel good, well, essentially know that I will do it because you come first. So if you tell me do it, I will do it. But then know that I will resent you for that and you're probably not going to like it. So if it's really important for you, I'm going to do it and I'm going to feel good about that. If not, and you're just kind of wasting my time here, I'm not going to feel good about that." He didn't say it this way, but I'm just kind of summarizing things so that the conversation is easier. And that made him feel really good and really powerful because he asserted himself and he asserted his boundaries and his no. And then they just talked it out. The girl realized that yes, she was used to, do these things and that it made her feel really good when he cared about her. And she felt that if he would just say no or if he would not bring her home, he would not care about her. So there was this entire like human normal chaos dynamic that came from that. But the self-esteem of both improved by being able to acknowledge what they really want and then make some steps towards that. And that at the expense of being liked or not liked or approved or not approved. I think that's the first thing. Because that will quickly show you, like, it will give you so much feedback. Like the real world will give you feedback very fast. So that's why one of the things we love to do in the dating world is to have guys go to nightclubs because it's a very hard environment where you face like very harsh feedback. And the way you react to these environments quickly um, changes the way you see yourself. So anything that is like a real action in the real world that can give you that form of feedback. One is saying no. Saying no is usually very like standing up for your beliefs and what you value, all that stuff. That's very hard for people. That doesn't mean that you go and have to fight the world and be an idiot that doesn't change his mind. It just needs to know that when you believe something and you think no, you just say no. Same way, if you believe yes, say yes. Um, reflect and journal, like just be aware of we talked about consciousness. Be aware of your, what you think, what you believe, what you value, all that stuff. That's very hard for people. That doesn't mean that you go and have to fight the world and be an idiot that doesn't change his mind. It just needs to know that when you believe something and you think no, you just say no. Same way, if you believe yes, say yes. Reflect and journal, like just be aware of if you're not conscious of what happens to you, like if you don't have self-consciousness, so self-aware, not self-consciousness, wrong word, like self-awareness, you will not be able to do much. So practice self-awareness. How do you practice self-awareness? Take a little bit of time, breathe well, stay present in the moment, and journal and notice your behaviors and when there was incongruence. Notice these moments when you're acting on autopilot. Like when you're responding something and 2 seconds later you think like, what made me say that? That's like bullshit, right? Like someone asks you, hey, like do you I don't know, example. Yeah, I want to go watch a movie. Do you want to go watch a movie? Yeah, of course. And then I said yes just because I wanted to please you, but actually I don't want to watch this movie. I don't want to do that. This type of behaviors, the unconscious things when you go against what you really believe, just fucking reflect. Don't change everything, but reflect and notice when it is. Practice number 3, look at yourself in the mirror and look really in your eyes and at all your body and try to understand what you like and don't like about yourself, and be really honest about it. That's the same thing with how you talk to yourself. And maybe last one would be to make an honest list of what are your and honest in this case probably needs to be go a little bit nicer on yourself than what you're used to if you have a low self-esteem, but make a list of what are your strengths and weaknesses so that you know how to really judge yourself properly. That's a lot of shit. I said.
You are flowing with beautiful coaching information. I love it. But we should definitely wrap up. This one kind of it was more of a self-discovery thing for us. We'll see what kind of value
Yeah,
it gets out of the podcast, but
it was nice.
I mean, obviously we've got a lot of things to say on the subject, but it's I think we need to dig into some of these deeper concepts better. I'm really interested in kind of diving down because I've always separated consciousness from like practical application. Like they were like two different sections of the workshops for me as a coach. And
Mm-hmm.
if self-esteem is directly tied to your level of consciousness, that is an interesting. Like we have a lot of tools for that. If all you
Yeah.
have to do is get to acceptance to have a high self-esteem, I think that's something that we can look into. Anyways, we got a school group. If you guys don't know what school is, it's the new up and coming community platform that all the new business entrepreneur people are using. We have one, and it's full of 300 thriving members and growing, talking about self-esteem, power, influence, and limitless excellence. We have a couple of courses in there. So if you have not joined our school group, it's free and you should join it if you like the things that come out of our brains and heads, because we get much more to come out of our brains and heads in that group. Anything else we got? Oh yeah, we got a thing coming up in Prague, right?
Yeah. End of August. I don't know if the podcast will be released by then, but it's August 27 to September 2nd, essentially from there are things going on from August.
Well, we also have something coming up in Australia, and I think one in Romania at some point. If you would like to attend a live event, one of the big 7-day things, so that we can change your life in an immersion, go check out the link in the description. It's like limitlessmentoring.com/apply, and you could talk to us and talk about what a live event can do for your goals and your self-esteem. As always, thank you, David, for joining me on the podcast. We're going to just keep doing this stuff until the cows come home. So we'll see you in the next one. And thank you.